And thank you for joining us to listen to Bill and Teona whine about the region, where we talk about government and the politics behind it, nonprofit and the people behind it, business and the money behind it. Let's go. And as we start, if you have any ideas of topics or people to interview for the show, or interested in advertising or sponsoring the show, please message us on Facebook at BT Winery or email us at btwinery@gmail.com. Now, well, real quick, what you're going to notice is that we don't have my co-host, my normal co-host Teona here today. She might hopefully get a chance to call in. Is she going to call in? T? Good morning. How are you doing, Miss Teona? Okay, well, tell the folks what you're doing and why you're not here today. All right. You say we're gonna keep it at that, huh? All right, now.
Absolutely.
Now, tell. Oh
no, not yet.
You know what? I did bring it though. I did bring it. It was in the car for a few days. I was a little.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that.
I'm going to take them all out of count. All 32. Okay. All right.
All right, Teona.
You have a good time.
All right, be safe. All right, so today I'm without my normal co-host, but I am honored to have the wonderful, the honorable Councilwoman Rita Hurd Days. Please give it up for her. Thank you for coming and co-hosting with me.
Thank you. I'm just pleased to be here. My last interaction with WGNU was a long time ago when Onion Horton was on this show. And probably no one out here even knows who Onion Horton was, but he was an activist, which is so important. And you're here today talking about activism, and he was truly that in the truest sense of the word. So great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm old enough that actually my dad used to have me listen to Onion. We used to listen to Onion in the car all the time, and he would take me all over the place. And yeah, I do remember a lot of that, which is probably a big reason why I do some of the stuff I do today.
Well, that's great. He was a good teacher. He really was.
All right. Well, okay. Let's talk a little bit about next week, real quick, just so folks know what's coming up next week. We have Jake Zimmerman, who is the current assessor and looks to be a candidate for county executive. So there's going to be some fireworks for that county executive's office, Councilwoman.
Well, it's very early in the process. It might be even more than Jake. So, but it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a testament to how serious this is. We have some major challenges in St. Louis County right now, and so we really need a leader that can do the work, who wants to do the work, who's committed to doing the work. And so again, the field is it hasn't even opened yet for filing, but I look to see maybe a couple more people perhaps entering in that race. So it's not over. It's not over yet.
Well, no, I'm sure it's going to be a lot to watch and plenty of fireworks. But since we're talking about fireworks, let's talk about what we've all as a country had to deal with, and I couldn't pull myself away this week from watching these impeachment hearings. This inquiry has been incredible. You had Mr. Kent, you've had Ambassador Bill Taylor, you've had Ambassador Marie Voyanovich yesterday, which was riveting. You got Roger Stone that just got convicted on 7 counts, all 7 that he was being charged for. So What you thinking about that? Were you as drawn in as I was?
Well, not really, but I'll tell you, and I will tell you why, because it is, in my mind, it is such an embarrassment for this country to be going through what it's going through now. The level of hypocrisy, if you will, of the leaders of this country, and just how this is being, people are being treated. People get away with whatever they get away with. They're convicted, and it seems as if they're happy to be convicted. So maybe they know something that I don't know. But it is really an embarrassment to the world of how this country has just kind of digressed, I guess, into just a mire of different controversies and issues that are affecting the people. At the end of the day, we're concentrating on this, and we're not taking care of the people of this country that need to be taken care of. And you look at your immigrant population, you look at the children, you look at the violence. We have a lot of things going on in this country, and yet we're sitting here, with a chief 45, whatever they call it.
Just 45.
Yeah, and we're looking at him tweeting all over the place, and just God. Absolutely, it's just not a good narrative in my mind right now. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Might have brought himself another impeachment article just with a tweet.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've always said, social media is wonderful for those who do that, but I'm going to tell you how much trouble it gets people in. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of things are said in the heat of the moment. Once you click that button, you can't take that back. And so I'm sure that
it's there forever.
That's right. And so I'm sure that if people would think a couple of times, maybe they wouldn't just say some of the things that they've said, but that remains to be seen too.
All right. Well, I mean, given the happenings that we've all witnessed, definitely over the last few years, I thought it would be a great idea to have a show to talk about activism and some of the organizations involved in activism. And, many of the activist organizations have come to be even since, 2016, since this president was elected. So what do you think about the grassroots activism that has been sprouted up across the country, some of it really in response to this new president?
Well, I think that the level of activism has increased. I'm excited about that. Activism basically happens when people are not heard. People's needs are not being met, and they don't know any other way to express that. And so they come together in different groups, and try to affect change in that manner. It's almost as if I'm going to try to embarrass people into doing the right thing, which is insane. But I think that at this particular point in our country, we have to have this. We have to have people understanding a different point of view in a lot of these issues, in taking care of children, in women, reproductive rights, looking at the immigration situation. We have to have people in the trenches who know these issues intimately and are willing to stand up and say what needs to be done in those. So I'm very happy to have, first of all, 4 extraordinary women as part of this activism.
There you go.
So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Yeah, is that a coincidence? I don't know.
No, it's just the reality of the situation.
Reality. All right, well, before we get started, I do want to go ahead and thank Paul Berry and the good folks over here at WGNU 920 AM for the opportunity to talk to the community that we all here care so much about. We have my man Seth behind the boards today. Our man Quentin unfortunately wasn't able to be here, but our prayers go out to him. And also, before we get started, I want to shout out the Pascal Show. My man Pascal, his show is here on WGNU 920 AM every day, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. So tune in to him. He's got a good show. I think before we get to this first break, I think we at least want to go ahead and introduce our next 2 guests, maybe have them say just a couple of words real quick before we dive into some discussion. Now, first up, we're going to take you in pairs. At first, we're going to go with Erica Williams, who is the Executive Director of A Red Circle, and Alexandra Johnson of AJ Legal Services. Now, how are you 2 ladies doing today?
Very well.
We're doing great.
All right.
Very nice.
All right.
So are we going to talk to him before the break, or are we going to talk to him after the break, or what are we doing?
Well, how about this? Just introduce yourselves a little bit. Give just a little quick 10, 15 seconds of your background, and then we'll come back around after the break.
All right, I will get started. I'm Erica Williams, founder and executive director of A Red Circle, which is a grassroots nonprofit organization based in North St. Louis County. We focus on 5 focus areas: employment, education, holistic living, policy, and the arts.
Okay.
And my name is Alexandra Johnson. I'm an attorney. I focus on estate planning, but I also try to do what I can, my little part in saving democracy.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All
Good
right.
to have you both here.
Good to have you both here, and we're going to get into it right after this first break. Thank you for tuning in to Bill and Teona Wine About the Region with my today guest co-host, Councilwoman Rita Days. We'll be right back.
What?
Said she, you can take it off.
Oh.
I said she's a natural.
Who?
You.
Well,
All right, let me check this out.
okay.
How long is the break?
Break's like 2 minutes.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it won't be long.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
What's your record is?
I mean, but whatever you have.
What is that little thing? What is that red thing?
What?
That little round thing?
This is a light or something. I think.
Oh,
I tried to use it last time. I don't know how you cut it on.
okay.
I think it's a. There we go.
Oh, okay.
It's just one. Yeah, beauty light.
Do you need to have a mic or what?
Oh no, they're good. They're good. I'm just gonna move this closer a bit.
All right, we got about 60 seconds.
I better sound for you on you guys.
I can lock those door today.
These things don't do a whole lot for your hairdo, you know.
And that's so much my concern.
Yeah,
I didn't touch
you
it.
haven't broken the seal.
I
I
didn't touch
noticed the seal.
You know, I was a little worried because they sat in the car like through this weather, this cold weather. So I was worried that the jar was going to be
bring hers
cracked.
too, and I forgot, but I'll get it next time.
How much longer do we have?
We probably got 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Maybe less.
So that's how people can listen.
All right. I'll bring us in, but then you have the first question.
What?
I'll bring us in, but then you have the
Oh,
first
okay,
question.
okay.
All right, we are back. Bill and Teona, Wine About the Region. We're here talking to Erica Williams of A Red Circle and Alexandra Johnson of AJ Legal Services. We're going to start with Erica.
Hey, Erica. How are you today?
I'm good.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, well, we know each other a little bit. I've attended a couple of your events, but tell me about A Red Circle and what was your impetus for starting such an organization?
So I live in the North St. Louis County region, grew up there my whole life, and over time began to notice the changes in demographics and investment and offerings to the community, such as housing, jobs, opportunities to go to certain restaurants or for entertainment areas and things of that nature. And I began to plan an economic development summit. This was going to be something that we could get people in a room together to do structured networking to see what was available in North County in terms of the vacant buildings, but also the infrastructure that was already in place to begin to build back up the region. But then when Michael Brown was killed in 2014, August 2014, and I began to protest with the people and really go outside and get involved more in the closer community, I began to realize that it wasn't just disinvestment that was plaguing North County, it was race and racism and racial inequities. And so I shifted my focus from strictly economic development to economic development through a racial equity lens, meaning looking at who's available, what assets are there, what are some of the systemic reasons for the changes, for the disinvestment, and what can we do to encourage investment, reinvestment in the region. You know, sometimes you look at places that have been hit with a hurricane. They have been hit with, other types of storms. Well, when those storms pass and the dust settles, people don't just say, oh well, the town is, gone. We have to move on.
Right.
No, they get involved. They roll up their sleeves. They come together to work. Well, disinvestment over the last 20 or 30 years or so has been our hurricane.
Okay.
And the people who left our region, who moved away, who took their businesses, who took their kids out of our schools, they left our community ravaged. And so now it's time for new people to come in. It's time for the current people who live there to gain the skills and knowledge and resources that we need to build back up our region.
I appreciate that. That is something that I've looked at, being the county councilwoman for the first district, and I often tell my colleagues I probably live and represent probably the most challenged area of the 7 districts that we
Definitely.
have. And so that's really helpful that you would not just necessarily stay with where you were going, but you evolve into something totally different than maybe you started off with. And so that's fantastic.
Okay, so tell us about. I heard you mention Ferguson. Tell us about the communities that you serve specifically, that your organization serves.
So a red circle, we service, we say 12 zip codes, which are the 12 zip codes of North St. Louis County, and they encompass the 5 school districts of Hazelwood, Ferguson, Florissant, Jennings, Normandy, and Riverview Gardens.
Okay.
And what that looks like can be different depending on what's happening. So far since I founded a red circle in 2017, we have been engaged in causes such as healthy food access, because that's one of the biggest signs of disinvestment. When healthy food leaves a region, when grocery stores are closing, when there's more fast food and dollar store type food offerings, then that's a sign that eventually health is going to decline in the region. Jobs are declining, and so that's our big focus. We also focus on education justice. We look at suspension and detention. Out of the 5 school districts I named, 3 of them are 99.9% Black, African American children. Yet the suspension rates are much higher for Black boys, especially, than for other children for the same types of infractions. And so you look at things like, okay, if kids are being suspended, they're staying out of school for so many days, how are they learning? And if they're in school and they're not, being able to learn because of funding, because of maybe they don't have the same resources that other schools in St. Louis County, 20 minutes away from North County, are getting, then that's a whole generation of new Black kids, African American kids that are going to be growing up, going into the workforce, the labor force, that are not going to have the skills that they need.
And that's true. I want to know. I want to go back to, how did the name a red circle come about? I often wanted to ask you that, and every time I see you, I forget to ask you that. So how did that come about?
So I was, like I said, I was protesting. I was becoming an activist, I guess. After Michael Brown Jr. was killed, I took my kids and family out. We made signs, and we tried to shut down the highway. My mom and I, we faced the cops in their armor gear, and my mom, she looked like a little princess or something, so, but they were in their riot gear, and we were going to face them down and show them that they cannot intimidate us. And so as I began to do that work, it was kind of like relief for me, because his death really caused me to become very angry. The death and the response from the people outside of the community, and calling our young Black boys thugs and things of that nature, that really, really angered me, because I have 4 sons and a daughter. And the fact that someone would say that about this child, what are they saying about our children? And so I began to look and see, okay, so maybe what else can I do? And so after the protest phase kind of phased out, I got into politics and began to help people with their campaigns, with policy and with messaging and things of that nature. And then I decided to go back to school to get my PhD in public policy, so I can really, become a powerhouse. And while I was in school, I had to do a class on planning a nonprofit. So I had to write a plan for up to 20 years.
Okay.
And so as I was doing that, my fake nonprofit was called His Hands and Feet. And it was going to be a faith-based organization that would look at short-term issues, his hands, and then try to figure out things like, okay, so if kids need coats, we can get the coats. But then let's look at the long-term systemic issues. Why do our kids need coats every winter? Why do we not have stores in North County that sells coats? Or why can our parents not get the job they need to buy the coats?
Right.
And so I was like, well, maybe I can do this, in real life. And so I went to the Secretary of State's website and looked up His Hands and Feet to see if I could get that name for my company, and it was already taken.
Okay.
There's a nonprofit in the state of Missouri called His Hands and Feet.
Mhm.
And so I kind of went back to the drawing board. I was still working full-time as a corporate paralegal in Clayton, still in school, raising my family. But one day I was out walking, getting my exercise on, and just thinking about all of the different interconnections of what's needed to make a community actually thrive. And so I'm making this motion with my hand as a circle, thinking about employment and thinking about jobs and thinking about, food and stuff like
And
that.
that brings me to, I guess, one of my questions, which is, given that there's so many challenges in our communities, how do you know which ones to focus on? Because, I'm sure just like any nonprofit organization, you're going to have, some level of limited resources. So you have to make sure that you're devoting that money in the most effective way. So how do you choose which issues to focus on?
That's a great question, and I'm going to just finish my thought real quick. So I was making the motion, like I said, with my hand, and realizing that the issues that we're talking about all stem from racism, but all blood is red. So that's the term, a red circle. And we chose the 5 focus areas that we did because, one, we work, like I said, 12 zip codes, very hyper-local. And so what we do is we work on what we can at the time with what we have, depending on what funding sources we have, what volunteers we have, what space we have available to work in. And so some of our projects could be 1 day volunteer, some can be long-term where we're actually looking to do some planning, some building, some planting, things of that nature.
Okay, well, as far as deciding how you use your resources, I just kind of want to go back to that. Where do you, how do you decide what to focus on?
So I go out into the community and I talk with the people. I also go to different events and learn different things, and what we decide on to work on will kind of depend upon what's happening. Like I said, we started with healthy food access as one of the big projects and programs because we really won't be able to do much of what we want to do. Also, along with healthy food access is civic engagement, because we know that a lot of the things that we want to see happen will come from policy changes, but I want to see the policy changes being driven by the people in the region, not from outside the region. So we're really focusing on make sure that people are voting, that they're engaged. One day we did a voter registration barbecue, and then in a couple of weeks we had someone come back and do Medicaid expansion petitions. So the people would not have been able to sign those petitions if they weren't registered voters.
Right. That's it. That's great. I mean, I tell you, it's a lot to do, and I don't envy you in the catchment that you have here and trying to make sure that you hit all cylinders. But it's needed. It is much needed, and so our people will be better off for it because of you being here. So
Thank you.
All right, so where we going now, Bill?
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up your segment here in just a second, but I guess I would ask you to explain to the people I guess it's your mission, the Red Circle's mission, economic development through a racial equity lens.
Well, that's kind of like
that's
our purpose, quote unquote purpose. I'm holding up air quotes for those of you who can't see.
Okay, explain what that means. Explain what that means to you and your organization.
Yes. So our mission statement is the holistic betterment of our community, semicolon, reversing the effects of racism one person and cause at a time. But the term economic development through a racial equity lens means just that. We need to see investment in our community. We need to see jobs. We need to see the housing structure come back into the hands of the people who live there. Right now, for example, there are blocks of homes that are owned by out-of-state investors, out-of-country investors. And because of that, they buy up blocks of homes, but they don't have the investment in the region. And so if the homes aren't being rented or sold, they're not paying the property taxes on those houses.
Right.
And what happens is the children who are in the schools who rely upon those property taxes suffer. And so a racial equity lens will be looking at, okay, if we're looking at fairness and justice, if the people in this region are 99.9% Black, African American, but the people who are owning the property, owning the real estate, they're not within this region, that's not fair. That's not just. So how can we provide investment? How can we support the people who want to become entrepreneurs, homeowners, who live in the region, who actually work in the region?
So you had a couple of events. I would consider those successful. Give me a couple of just initiatives that you put together that you would deem as putting a Red Circle on the map, being successful in those. Give me a couple of those.
Yeah, real quick. Take maybe like 30 seconds.
So we are working on working for election 2020. We're currently building up an urban farm school in the city of Pine Lawn.
Oh, wonderful.
We just finished up our healthy community market in the city of Riverview, and we are working in the elementary schools to mentor and tutor our children.
All right.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's really great.
Well,
congratulations on that, by the way, and I wish you much success.
Oh, and real quick, we're having a Kwanzaa concert at the end of this year, so stay tuned for that.
All right, well, very good. Erica Williams with a Red Circle, thank you so much. We will be back in just a moment.
Yay.
Are we out there?
Huh?
Are we out there?
Yeah, but
Yes and no.
Huh?
This continues to go
still, you
live.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Why?
Couldn't you go?
I'm listening.
I'm engaged in a conversation here. Okay. I talk for you.
Okay.
All right, we got a half hour. So we want to make sure we get everybody in and get sufficient amount of time. So let's try to keep everybody to about, I guess, 7-8 minutes, something like that. And I'll give you cues, but I think we'll be fine. Yeah.
I took video of you and I posted it already, so go back to the video.
You're like the world's best board member.
She's the best.
On it.
She's the best. One of my favorite people. I tell you, we met through Facebook first. We were just engaging, and then we met
And I
at
was
an
like,
event.
who is this woman? I need to friend her. Like, I'd never met her, but I mean, a lot of my friends I've never physically met, but on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then we met physically at
Yeah.
she's just reminding me of that. Actually, Senator the National Women's Political Movement.
Oh,
I didn't realize that. And
I
that would be
remember, and I
physically
rarely
met.
make it to meetings, but I remember.
Yeah.
WBC.
You know, but it was funny because by that time we were already friends. Do you know what I mean? Like we had posted and liked each other's and shared stuff.
I gotta tell you, I've been hearing about Red Circle for several years now. And
Oh.
it's really inspiring.
Hopefully
what
good
you've
stuff.
been able to do. Yes.
I'm glad to get that in there, but everything that you were talking about is interconnected. Your healthcare, your education.
Angie, you know, why don't you go ahead and step on up? Because I think we'll be in the middle of this next section, or at some part of this next section, that way you're already there. All right, we are back. We are back. Bill and Teona whine about the region. Again, Erica Williams, we want to thank you. But right now we have next up Alexandra Johnson of AJ Legal Services. Come on down.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Alexandra, let's go to you. Tell the folks about the event today and why this kind of community engagement is important. Just let us know.
Well, there is an event today happening from 10 to 2 p.m. at University UMC Church in the University Loop area. And we have basically brought together a group of 5 women, brought together an incredible coalition of organizations and really powerful speakers who are in their own areas and also in collaboration with each other, making change happen all across the nation. We actually, sitting behind me, is somebody who flew in from the East Coast to speak at our event. And basically, I think a lot of times people have been separated off and doing their own thing. And what we really need to do is everybody needs to level up. We need to level up, just like you do in a game, our level of cooperation. We need to level up our strategizing, our organizing. As we prepare for 2020, we cannot anymore be siloed. If you are siloed, reach out, find somebody else who's doing it, build together, and that's the objective of today's event, and I honestly think it's going to be really, really powerful.
That's fantastic. Now, I know that you're a lawyer, right? And you're representing pretty much a Hispanic constituency. Is that correct? Or
Well, I mean, it's not a monolithic group, right?
Okay.
So I'm a progressive individual, and not all Hispanics, Latinos share my views.
Okay.
So I represent me, and I happen to have a Latina mother.
but the economic footprint of the Hispanic community in St. Louis is growing tremendously.
Yes, ma'am.
And so they're becoming a majority, if you will, of people living here. And so talk about that a little bit. Talk about the economics of the community and how that's working.
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, there was one store in South City off of Oliva. It was called La Tropicana, and it was, there were a few people in the community. It was just much smaller. But what has happened is, as you know, through the work of the International Institute and other many very powerful organizations in the area, St. Louis has actually, in many ways, for other communities as well, the Bosnian community, we know Asian communities have grown. There's a lot of activity on South Grand, and the same has happened here in the region. Now, this also comes through the work of specific people who have built from the ground up. We have Carlos Ramirez, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, was voted best in the nation last year. Gilberto Pineda, who's actually also just starting his radio show, and he's involved with Cortex. The Hispanic Leaders Group has worked for over 35 years on a variety of projects to really better the nation. So now we have about 300,000 or so people in the area. And because of the medical, academic, and business interests here, a lot of this Hispanic community is different. Many of Latino communities around the nation have kind of a different composition. Here locally, there's a really higher level of education and second generation people. And this is not in any way to disparage any other Latino community, but it's just the factual reality of our community here. And actually, County Executive Sam Page said because of that, his impression is that we have the Hispanic community has a larger footprint than would normally correspond with the numbers because of that level of activity and engagement. I personally ran for office in early in 2017. At 2016, there are 66 seats in Missouri. In the Missouri House went to the Republican Party wholly uncontested. So I'm sorry, as a progressive, I was mad at the Democratic Party. I mean,
That's unacceptable.
You know,
yeah, that's unacceptable.
You'll never
That
win
is
if you don't go out there.
unacceptable.
Right.
Right? And you can't blame people for going to the polls and voting for who they want for. I mean, you can criticize that, but that's what you're supposed to do in a democracy. And if we don't even put up a candidate, I mean, put
What's
up
the
your
options?
Aunt Jane. You know,
You don't have any options.
exactly. Make people show up to some debates and allow the people to ask some questions. So anyway, long story short, I realized that in our community, in the Hispanic community, we didn't have a lot of Latinos running for office. We didn't have a lot of Latinos, even though we have this education level or whatever. So I've been trying very hard with the good people of Comunidad Latina, Comunidad STL. It's a group that we co-founded. Several people, Hanini Hilberg of Hispanic Festival Inc. They see about 100,000 people at their events annually. And her daughter, Alyssa Hilberg, Maria Yaksik, who is a realtor, Feliz Tovar, who is a financial advisor, Carlos Suarez, who is, among other things, involved in the United Nations. They just got recognized by Mayor Lyda Cruzan, their local chapter. And we co-founded a political activity. It's not formally a PAC yet. I hope we're moving in that direction. As president of the Hispanic Bar Association, I've had to step back a little bit from that politics right now just because of my other responsibilities, but they are carrying that torch, and I hope we're moving. Daniela Velasquez is also active, and Alicia Hernandez, so I hope we're moving into the direction of formalizing a political action committee to become more politically present in an organized fashion.
Well, that lands me into the next question. And
Yes,
what's
ma'am.
your plans for 2020? We had the census, and traditionally the rumor is that Hispanics are not counted. They're afraid to mention where they live or even go on the rolls. And so, how are you addressing that, particularly the 2020 elections? And hopefully, you'll have a lot of people that will be running for office from the Hispanic community.
Well, I think several of us are working on it, but with regard to the census, I think I want to mention Tony Maldonado, who's the chair, currently entering I believe what will be his third term as chair of the Hispanic Leaders Group. He's been working a lot on the census, and he'd be a good person to have on your show because he can speak to that. He's working with hard to count communities, which can be Black communities. Poverty can be the issue.
Sure.
Immigrant communities who don't want to be counted because they're afraid. So there's a whole group of what they call hard to count communities, and various reasons for each community that make it harder to count them. So the census has that kind of double-edged sword concern to it. Because of that fear of being counted and getting reported, which has some very valid reasons. The census was
Absolutely.
used for the
Absolutely.
Japanese internment purposes. So there's a reason to not want to be counted, but at the same time, you have to be counted in order to get the resources, in order for people to know that you're here. So my hope is that those of us who are here without any concerns about being counted will raise our voices, and that my plan for 2020 is to do everything I can to get those of us in that category to raise our voices.
Well, that's interesting because we were at a meeting and someone said that you need to send people in the communities who are of the community
Yes,
in
ma'am.
order to get those kinds of numbers. So
Yes.
don't send somebody else into my community and
Yes, ma'am.
expect you to have a good reception. It won't happen. So I'm very glad to hear that. Glad to hear that.
Well, that's wonderful. We thank you so much, Alexandra, and definitely keep your community engaged. And since to date we're talking so much about activism, what I want to do next is bring up someone who represents one of the most activist organizations, especially around reproductive rights. And that would be Angie Postal of Planned Parenthood. All right, so what's your title? It's a big title. It's big.
It's Vice President of Education, Policy, and Community Engagement.
Wow. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I will tell you, I was so impressed with the opening of your new clinic. I mean, I was
I
there
know.
for the, it was, I mean, it was just like all of a sudden this building appeared. And nobody
I saw that and I was like, oh my God,
Yes.
you're not abandoning
Yes,
us.
exactly,
They will continue
exactly.
the fight.
Well, tell us what's going on with your activism, and I know it's a challenge. You know, we've been fighting this battle for years and years and years. We talked a little earlier. It seems like when we get a point, then we have to go back and refight the same battle over and over and over again. So, talk to us about what you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm really lucky. I work for both Planned Parenthood, the nonprofit healthcare provider, and also for Planned Parenthood Advocates, the advocacy organization. So in my role with the healthcare provider, I work with our sex educators. And so
Okay.
these are people who partner with other community organizations that serve youth. And so we do a lot of the things you would think about when you think about sex education, so anatomy, birth control, staying safe, STIs, but then we also do a whole host of issues around that impact teens' health and sexuality. So things like healthy relationships, body image, media literacy, exploring your own values. And we know that when teens have that holistic approach, they can stay healthy and safe. I also work with our Affordable Care Act counselors, so they help people get enrolled in the Affordable Care Act
Good.
and also find other means of insurance if they fall into the Medicaid hole, because Missouri shamefully has not expanded Medicaid. But then I also work with advocates, and that's why I'm here today, and partnering with Erica and Alexandra and Mallory on this training. And advocates essentially, does what it sounds like. It advocates for Planned Parenthood's patients, and we organize and mobilize Planned Parenthood's patients and other supporters of reproductive freedom.
Well, it's good because you have to have people to understand that abortion is not the only thing that you do. And absence, your involvement in sex education with our children, many of them don't get it. They just don't. Parents are very uneasy in speaking about that. So it's good to have some people that are well versed in the conversation.
Well, and our model is really that the teens should have good relationships with their parents. We're there to support them, and if they don't have a relationship with their parents or in their school where they can get accurate information, like, we're here for them.
Well, they can have a relationship with me, just not that their parents going to talk about it. Okay. But what is Act Local? What is that? Is that the training that you all are doing today?
That's right. So
Okay.
Planned Parenthood Advocates has been invited along with other groups to do this community training to help, as Alexandra said, activists in our community level up their engagement and get more involved in demanding the change that we need. And so all of these organizations have come together across issues because we know that people don't lead single issue lives, and so there can be no single issue struggle. That's Audre Lorde's quote that I totally agree with as an organizer.
Well, we talked about the silos earlier, and it's all a circle. It is all a circle. So we're getting that done today.
Can I just add for Act Local that they, basically Beau Willimon, who is a local screenwriter, he worked on House of Cards and other shows, he apparently is funding, going around the country with Act Local, and they go in, they pop into a community and fund small events like this, but that end up being really powerful. Like, they change the lives of the whole village with that microloan, and it's really powerful. I think it's really amazing, effective.
All right, and what people might not know, Beau Willimon is actually the writer and creator of the HBO show House of Cards.
Yeah,
So
that's
he's
right.
been doing some things. But we're going to head to break real quick. We'll be right back. Thank you for tuning in. Bill and Teona, wide about the region. Okay. Now what?
Are you done?
No, I don't think so yet, but I'm gonna grab it too.
Are we gonna be
Closer to
Yes, I think we need to go first because you had to go set up
Right,
something.
exactly.
Bill, is it okay?
What's that?
Talk to your guests.
Can we pop out or?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's set up, so, but, all right.
See you over there.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I did get my.
I'll actually be on my way
question
over
answered.
there.
Okay,
When
awesome.
everybody here.
Fantastic. Well, I've been posting, so. Well,
Good luck on your event today. No, I won't be there. I got another something to do, but good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now we're going to Mallory?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, maybe we have one last question, and try to keep it tight, and then we'll come with Mallory, because I want to get redistricting.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Bill, can you introduce me as All on the Line today instead of NDRC?
As who?
And as I'm here with the All on the Line campaign as opposed to the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. Thank you. But yeah, we'll talk about redistricting.
You know, we lost it one last time. We lost it.
Look at the consequences.
Democrat.
Snacks.
Okay. I'll bring us in. I'm going to do a piece of this question here,
Okay.
and then we're going to eliminate, and then we're going to go ahead and eliminate the rest of these.
Oh, well, then
Because I think
you're
we're
gonna
gonna-
finish her up then. You finish her
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Because we wanna get to Mallory.
yeah, I want to get redistricting in. All right, we are back. Bill and Teona Wine About the Region, here with my wonderful guest co-host, the absolutely stupendous Councilwoman Rita Days. All right, well let's wrap up with Angie here from Planned Parenthood. I do want to get an understanding of why you think it's significant for so many organizations to actually come together for training, to I mean, is it like to sort of infuse activism across the groups, or what's the thought processes behind it?
For sure. If any of these issues, if we're going to win on any of these issues, we have to work together. And we've seen that our Governor Parson, and many members of the Missouri legislature don't have the best interest of our communities in mind. They're not beholden to the people. And so bringing together these activists together to work across issue allows us to have actual wins for all of the issues we care about. So, for example, Clean Missouri, last election in 2018, all of these groups worked together on that because we knew that the governor and the legislature weren't going to pass legislation that changed the district lines and changed the lobbying reforms that people needed in order to be represented by their government.
So when you do talk about the activism again, that's why we have to have that. If you have your elected officials that are not doing or not acting in the best interest, then you have to go and you have to create these coalitions to make those kinds of things happen. So that's great.
Oh, for sure. And I think in reproductive freedom specifically, we've had some real examples recently where the government was acting not in the best interest of people. So Governor Parson, in his obsession with ending access to legal abortion in our state, has weaponized his bureaucracy in the health department to do things that are really disturbing to most individuals, like tracking patients' periods.
I read that.
It's
horrible.
Right. And the thing is, we've had wins on some of these, even in this hostile environment, because of community activists. So earlier this summer, you might remember, Governor Parson's health department was forcing Planned Parenthood doctors to provide an additional medically unnecessary pelvic exam on pregnant people. And pelvic exams, for those of us who've had babies, like me, are important when you need them, but not something you want.
It's not a pleasurable experience
If there's
by
no
any
medical
means
reason.
at all, right?
But my point is people stood up. When that news came out, and Planned Parenthood Advocates was surely a part of making sure that news got out, people hit the streets. And you know what? The health department relented because they knew it wasn't medically indicated. If it was medically indicated, they wouldn't have relented, but they did because of public pressure and organizing.
Good. Well, good luck to you. And this is not an ideal climate for you, but I think you can handle that.
Thank you.
Right. So Angie Postal from Planned Parenthood, we do want to thank you for joining us, and you're still welcome to stay around. We got a few more minutes, but I want us to make sure that we get to, one of the things that I think is so significant, especially when you're talking about 2020, you're talking about a census year. I mean, this is when redistricting, when lines are redrawn, and one of the words that I'm sure people have heard more than they care to even talk about is this crazy word called gerrymandering. What in the world is gerrymandering? But so I want to bring up our next guest, Mallory Long, who is with the All on the Line campaign. So
Yeah.
thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mallory. Now let's talk a little bit about the 2020 election cycle. Tell us about the organization that you work for and your role.
Yeah, so I'm the training director at All on the Line. We are a grassroots organization that really focuses on making sure that citizens, members of the public, or the regular people, as I often call them, are engaged in the redistricting process that actually happens in 2021. So redistricting is part of our Constitution, just the same way the census is, that every 10 years we redistrict, and we do that based on census data, right? So 2020 is very important for us because if we don't get folks counted, our districts are incorrect, and then we aren't getting the representation that we need or want in our government, right? So 2020 is really important for us in making sure that everyone is counted and that we have fair representation across the states. And then, of course, there are some big elections where we will have the opportunity to put some new folks in office that can potentially really impact that redistricting process. In some states, not all of them, but I believe in Missouri, at least the legislature, the folks who have been elected to office, play some role in the redistricting process. So what we're talking about is people who actually are being elected on those district lines, right? They are able to say where they think those district lines should go. And that is where gerrymandering comes into the process. And it is very confusing, gerrymandering versus redistricting, because gerrymandering is supposed to look like redistricting. It is the co-option of the redistricting process to manipulate those district lines to ensure the success of a political party, institution, incumbent, whatever it might be. But the idea is that people are not picking their own representatives. The representatives are picking which voters they want to come out and vote for them. And that's a problem.
If you have you seen the documentary Rigged? That was a major part in that, and how it was I think of a district in Texas that they just drew in and captured the people that they wanted to have in their particular district, and that's how they continued to win. So
absolutely, and Texas is a really good example. It's actually an example that I use frequently. There are two ways that we gerrymander. They call them packing and cracking.
okay.
And cracking, I always use Austin, Texas. The city of Austin is split into 6 congressional districts. One of which stretches from Austin to Houston, which just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
If we're thinking about communities, someone who lives on one side of Austin probably has more in common with someone who lives somewhere else in Austin as opposed to someone who lives in Houston, right?
Right. Well, let's say to the people why it is important that you do this. Why is it important that underserved communities get counted? Because we know last census we lost a congressional person, so we were down to 8, I think now. So how do we get this to the people? How do they get to the point where this is so important that they need to do this?
Yeah, and how do we convey to them that this is really important and that they should care?
Yeah, so we just finished up at All on the Line our first tour of our training program, Redistricting You, where we talked about this a lot, and I think that what I found in having conversations, we just talked to 450 volunteers across the country over about 5 weeks, and what I found in talking to those folks is that it's about the issues, right? Redistricting itself is a process, and most folks don't love a bureaucratic process, right? What folks care about are the issues and being able to make progress on the issues, and gerrymandering really impacts our ability to make progress on the issues because our elected officials no longer feel accountability to their constituents, right? If you know that you're going to win your election time and time and time again, you don't actually have to be invested in making your constituents happy, and that is very dangerous. It leads down a road of being more committed to party ideology, to politics, to big donors, to corporations, anyone who are not the voters, right? And that's really a problem. And Angie and I know each other because I used to also work at Planned Parenthood Action in Washington, D.C. And the reason I came to the redistricting world is because I was so sick of fighting when we know that so many people, the vast majority of Americans, support Planned Parenthood. They support reproductive health and rights. They support abortion care, right?
Support choice.
But
That's right.
our elected officials don't take that into consideration because it is difficult right now for us to hold those folks accountable.
Well, we thank you for coming from all the way from the East Coast
Absolutely.
To St. Louis to kind of give us some hints and things that we can do to kind of engage the people. I think that's going to be critical as we're looking to the census and as we're looking to 2020 election.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming and enjoy this cold weather that we're having here.
I bet when she booked her ticket that she didn't think that she was going to be on the radio as soon as she landed.
That's right, that's right. But no, I'm so happy to be here. I am a Midwesterner. I'm a Midwesterner by my upbringing. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
There you
So
go.
the 25 degrees this morning, I was ready.
You were ready for it, huh?
That's right.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Well,
good luck to you, though,
absolutely.
because this work is extremely important,
It
and
is.
we have to impart that to the people that how important it is, and get them to participate.
Okay.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Well, we do want to at this time thank all of our guests. First, we had Erica Williams of A Red Circle, Alexandra Johnson of AJ Legal Services, and right here still in the studio we have Angie Postal of Planned Parenthood and Mallory Long of the All on the Line campaign, doing great things to make sure that we take care of ourselves and our communities in 2020. So all I can say is people get involved, find something that you're passionate about and get involved. And again, we do want to thank Paul Berry and the great folks here at WGNU 920 AM for putting up with us for one more week. And again, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. We're going to continue to whine about the region because we care. And if you have an idea on topics or people to interview for the show, or interested in advertising or sponsoring the show, message us on Facebook at BT Winery or email us at btwinery@gmail.com.
Well, thank you, Bill. I was very happy to be here with you today.
Well,
and, I think it's my first time ever co-hosting
Yeah.
a radio show, so I'm happy.
Yeah, you've done a lot of firsts on our show, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman.
And thank you to all of our guests as well.
All right. We are out.